The government is staying open for business for now. Today, the House passed a 2-week extension of a funding bill that would includes actually $4 billion of cuts from the federal budget. Now, by the way, the Democrats wanted a 4-week extension and the GOP wanted only 2 weeks. Internally, we were taking bets here as to which side it would be closer on. Of course, everybody bet that it would be closer to the Republican side, so we thought maybe it'd be 16 days instead of 14 days. Nope, we were too optimistic. The Democrats accepted the Republican version completely. And Steve King, a right-winger in the House, by the way, voted against it anyway. It didn't defund Planned Parenthood yet. Not good enough. Now, Republicans say we absolutely need these cuts because it's the only way to reduce the deficit.
Our goal here is to cut spending. When we say we're going to cut spending, read my lips. We're going to cut spending.
We need to cut spending now.
I believe that we need to keep the current tax rates at the level that they are. I'm introducing a bill today to do just that. But there's a real problem here with all of the spending that is not paid for.
They keep saying over and over, we need to cut spending, we need to cut spending. As usual, not true. They're presenting another false choice. There's another way to cut the deficit, one that they refuse to consider. We can raise revenue. Yes, that means raising taxes. And yes, are you ready for this? I hope you're sitting. I definitely think we should raise taxes. Now, let me show you how much money we can raise if we just raise taxes a little bit on the top earners in the country. Not teachers, not firemen, or cops, the very top bracket in the country. In just 2 years, we could raise $91 billion by scrapping the Bush tax cut for the top 2%, another $23 billion by raising the estate tax, and $40 billion by raising capital gains taxes to 20%, the level that they were under President Clinton. By the way, that's still a comically low rate, but even that would do the job. Look, that took me 2 minutes, and I raised $154 billion. Now, I know conventional wisdom in Washington says raising taxes is political suicide. You can't do it. But that's also not true. Look, the polls don't bear it out at all. Let me give you examples. In a just-released New York Times CBS News poll, people were asked, if you had to reduce your state's budget deficit, what would you do? 40% said that they would raise taxes. 22% said they would decrease public employee benefits. 20% said they would decrease funding for roads. And just 3% said they would decrease funding for education. Now, do you get that? Raising taxes beats cutting public employee benefits, of course, what they're trying to do in Wisconsin, by nearly a 2-to-1 margin. Now, it also beat cutting education by a more than 10-to-1 margin. 40% say raise taxes, 3% say cut education. Come on, I keep asking you this because the numbers are so clear. How much clearer can they be? And now that's people saying they would much rather pay more in taxes themselves than cutting funding for these important programs. Now wait till you see how much people like raising taxes when it only applies to the rich. A national poll from CBS News, Vanity Fair, asked people, what's the first thing you would do to balance the federal budget? 61% said they would raise taxes on the rich. 4% said they would cut Medicare, and 3% said they would cut Social Security. Let me sum it up for you in one word. Overwhelming. They keep telling you got to cut Social Security and they got to cut your Medicare. When they ask you, the American people, you say, no, raise taxes on the rich. That's the other way to do it. Now I'm asking you, do we live in a democracy or don't we? Why are our politicians ignoring the clear popular will? Unfortunately, there's an answer to that. It's because they're representing the rich donors that got them elected and not you. All right, joining me now is former Clinton Labor Secretary Robert Reich. He's now a professor at UC Berkeley. Secretary Reich, great to have you here, of course. And
hi, Cenk.
Hey there. I want to ask you. You know, they'll say, hey, no, you can't do this. You can't raise taxes. In Washington, people's go crazy over this stuff. That it's not feasible. Why do you think it might be feasible? And how?
Well, of course it's feasible. Cenk, of course it's feasible. I mean, under Dwight David Eisenhower, President Eisenhower in the 1950s, who nobody would have accused of being a socialist, I mean, he was a Republican, the income tax rate of on the richest Americans was 91%. I mean, we've been here. We've done this. It's not a matter of soaking the rich. The other point that is not often talked about is that more income and wealth is now concentrated at the very top in America than we've seen in 80 years. I mean, we have the top 1% is taking home over 20% of total national income. So if we don't tax people fairly, if we don't simply go where the money is, we can't. It's just a giant zero-sum game. I mean, it's just the middle class who is seeing no increase in income at all, getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, and losing public services that are vital to them at the same time.
And by the way, since 1979, for those of you at home that don't know this, the top 1% have nearly quadrupled their income, whereas the rest of us have stayed right about even. And look at that. In the 1970s, the share of the top 1% for the national income was 9%, nation's wealth. Now it's 23.5%, the highest level it's been since right before the Great Depression. Now, Secretary Reich, this isn't just about, though, hey, let's get the money from the rich, because that's where it is, and they've accumulated all the wealth up at the top. It also makes sense for the rich if we had more equal distribution of income because of the effect that it would have on the middle class. Tell us about that. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, because, if the middle class gets a shrinking portion of total income, as has been the case over the last few years, the middle class doesn't have the purchasing power, Cenk, to turn around and buy the stuff that America can produce. And that means high unemployment. It means slow economic growth. I mean, we can't have an economy that is getting out of the gravitational pull of the Great Recession based upon the purchasing of the top 1% or top 5% or even top 10%. I mean, the way we actually grow the economy is through spreading the benefits of economic growth and economic change. The top 1%, or even the top 1/10 of 1%, would be better off with a smaller share of a rapidly growing economy than they would be right now with a large share of an economy that is growing painfully slowly and is still having a hard time getting out of this Great Recession.
Right, and we know that partly because, during the Clinton administration, which you worked at, we created 22 million jobs. We had a booming economy when we had the higher tax rates, and it didn't hurt the economy at all to have those higher tax rates. You made a great point in your last article on this issue, that in 2005, 17 million people bought cars. In 2010, only 12 million people bought cars, and in home sales went from 7.5 million to 4.6 million. Now, if people are buying less cars, less homes, less everything, how are corporations and rich people supposed to make money? I mean, it hurts everybody, doesn't it?
Oh, not only does it hurt everybody, Cenk, but it also breeds a kind of anger. I mean, so many middle-class people, lower middle-class people, working-class people are frustrated. They are anxious. They're worried about paying their bills. They see people at the very top getting away with, the equivalent of murder. I mean, look at what happened on Wall Street. There's not a single Wall Streeter who has actually been indicted or brought to justice after that huge implosion on Wall Street. And people get cynical and they get angry, and then they see, Republicans are very good at channeling that anger toward what? Government, immigrants, public employees. An angry population and an angry populace could just as easily turn their anger toward the very rich. Again, it is in the interest of the people at the top to actually call for a more equitable distribution of the gains of economic growth and a better tax system, a tax system that is fair.
All right, former Labor Secretary Robert Reich, very clear. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Cenk.